said, what do you know? I'm not making it up.
Doesn't that still kind of go on in China?
What's that?
Doesn't that still kind of go on in Chinese culture?
Yes.
Yeah, but
I said the 20th century. Well, this is a little bit later than that, but just, they're trying to limit their population, and the government is taxing people heavily who have more than the prescribed number of children. Now, they had an earthquake. They hit a school one time and killed a bunch of Chinese school children. So the government, in its mercy, said those parents who lost children can have another one to replace the one they lost without paying the tax. Basically, you could have another free child to replace the one you lost.
Yeah, but if that was still a practice, why is there 1 billion Chinese people in the world? I mean, obviously something's working. They got to have two tango, so.
Yeah, it's work. I mean, it's because their population control program has not yet had the time to take effect. And also, another answer to your question is better medicines keep a higher percentage of people alive longer. Better medicines and better diet. Now, again, the Chinese population really started to increase in the 1700s when the smallpox vaccination event. Before this time, Chinese couples might have 10 to 15 babies, and only about a third of them grow up. Well, the smallpox vaccination came along with sanitation, hand washing, discovery that germs cause disease. The couples would still have 10 to 15 babies, except this time 12 or 13 of them grew up. And that created a big superpopulation explosion really fast. And the modern methods of trying to control it have not yet, owing to the fact that they're living longer, have not yet had the effect. Now, given about 50 more years, the population might decline, or at least it might be stabilized. Anyway, now, moving on to art. I normally don't deal much in art, but this thing here is, now you see a picture on page 87. This I want to elaborate on. The first emperor of China, his tomb was found, and in his tomb was found about, I believe, 6,000 terracotta figures. They were life-size, average of about 6 foot tall, indicating that people living back then might have been, again, fairly large. Even modern-day Americans' height is not on the average of 6 foot. And no two of them were alike. It's believed that these, not just terracotta humans, but also terracotta horses, it's believed that these were statues of the king's servants, whom he hoped to take with him into the next life. Now, some kings, and this gives you incentive to keep your king alive, some kings would kill their servants when they died, so that their servants would follow them in the next life, and the king would come to the next life with a lot of servants. But in this case, it appears that this emperor merely constructed some terracotta statues of his servants, and hopes that he would carry them 6,000 or so persons with him into the next life and impress the gods on how great and powerful he had been. For a time, this terracotta statues are on display right here in Atlanta at the Atlanta Civic Center. I did not go see them. I seldom go see anything at the Civic Center, but I don't know why. I mean, it just, I keep myself fairly busy in the business of rearing up 3 children and taking care of this, that, and the other. Just simply does not lend itself to having a whole lot of time for extras. But these statues were on display. Did anybody happen to see them?
Yep.
Okay, 3, 4, I have 4 hands going up. All right, excellent.
Well, how did they get lost? I mean,
How'd they get lost?
Yeah.
All right. I'm so glad you asked that. So many of the ancient kings, their tomb has been lost. Now, in the case of Genghis Khan, we know he lost his on purpose. He had himself buried in a wide open field. Then he had, I mean, he was long dead, but he had a servant kill the persons who had buried him, and then had a bunch of horses, 100,000 men with on horses, stampede over the wide area where it's buried to cover any trace. His tomb has not been seen yet. In Hebrew literature, Moses' tomb has not been seen by anyone. Alexander the Great. Now, he made news just last week. There are persons who think they have found his tomb. But, as for his father, Philip of Macedon, his tomb remained hidden for many years, and all of a sudden one day we discovered it. In Britain, they found a magnificent tomb that was apparently good enough for a very, very rich king, and didn't find a body, they don't know who the tomb belonged to. the tomb of Clovis' father was found. It was covered. I mean, it was had a whole lot of golden bees, and Napoleon felt like he was destined to be there because he took control of the golden bees. But so many of these tombs get lost. Here's how. You just assume that everybody's going to know where the tomb is. Well, the people who do know die off and don't tell their children. And after a while, nobody knows. It sounds like it couldn't happen in a modern world where we keep such meticulous records, but keep in mind, at the time of, for instance, Clovis, only about 1% of the population could read. Even your kings and queens could not read. Even your highest nobility could not read. So if this stuff wasn't written down, that means it was passed by word of mouth. But one day maybe some father told his little son, this is the tomb of Clovis, and he was the only, didn't realize he's the only one left alive who knew that. The little son forgot about it. The father died shortly thereafter. The little son grew up and never told anyone else. Say the tomb of Clovis is right here, and it's lost to history for a thousand, actually more than 1,000 years. So many of these tombs were off. Anyway, the tomb of the first emperor, now he may have wanted it hidden on purpose now, like Genghis Khan did. As for Alexander, we don't know why his tomb was hidden. But anyway, good question. All right. One thing more now I want to say about language. Your book shows a comparison of Chinese words with a Mesopotamian cuneiform, with Egyptian hieroglyphs, with bone script, China, and in modern Chinese, to try to show that, and folks, this is known to be right, Chinese writing, in fact, was invented over here before the Chinese moved to China and carried with them to China, but it got changed a little bit along the way. Now, there have been many books written in just the last 40 years that ancient Chinese characters actually depict Genesis events. Like there's a character about a snake entwined in a tree, which reminds you of the story of the Garden of Eden. And I asked a Chinese man one time, I mean, I don't know any Chinese, but I asked a Chinese man, is this so? He looked at the book and looked and said, yeah, this is really, really old Chinese, but yeah, that's right, these are the symbols. And also, the Chinese had the story of the Garden of Eden. And in their flood story, they're the only other peoples on the face of the earth who actually pronounce the hero's name, Noah, in their flood story. Just same type of flood story. Again, the Chinese are known to have started out either here in Egypt or here in Israel or Canaan, and spread through, a lot of them might have spread through India and around Southeast Asia. Some of them, though, were known to be Caucasian and spread through the Caucasian mountains and come in by way of the northern route. But they had, again, a 7-day week cycle, zodiac, stories of a garden, a magnificent garden, and a fall, a flood, as do all other peoples on the face of the earth. You know, it just shows that far back there was a connection between them and the rest of humanity. Then they got cut off from the rest of humanity by big Himalayan mountains and by long distances. And possibly by climate change, as these peoples lost a lot of their civilization and lost their ability to travel, pockets of humanity found themselves isolated from each other. All right.